Hello. Welcome to the Des Moines Register Political Soapbox. My name is Brian Smith. I'm a senior editor at the Register and am director of the Soapbox. Thank you so much for everyone being here with us today. The Soapbox is an important part of the Register's tradition of civic discourse here in the state of Iowa. It's why we invite all of the candidates to come here and address fairgoers directly. And a big part of that also means that we practice Iowa nice here at the Soapbox. So what that means is if you have a sign, we ask that you please keep it lowered so that the people behind you can't see through a sign. So if you keep it down, that means everyone has a chance to see and hear from the candidates. You are welcome to cheer, but we ask that you please don't jeer. And with that, our first candidate for today is Taylor Wettach. He is a Democrat running for state auditor.
Hey everyone, how are we doing today? My name is Taylor Wettach, and I'm running to make sure we keep an independent watchdog in the office of state auditor. It's great to be out here at the Iowa State Fair. Where else can you get a deep fried double bacon corn dog? Go look at a 600-pound cow made entirely of butter and listen to some guy talk about standing up against government corruption all before lunchtime. You just can't beat it, folks. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Taylor, a talk about state auditing? That sounds so exciting. Sign me up. It sounds even more exciting than watching paint dry on the Varied Industries building. But just bear with me for a few minutes, folks, because while it might not actually sound that exciting, state auditing, actually going after folks from taking your money, ought to be a state sport, official state sport, like dodge that pothole or clipping coupons. For those of you I've not had the chance to meet, I'm a 7th-generation Iowan. I'm from Muscatine, and I'm 36 years old. So yes, I am, in fact, younger than Chuck Grassley. Grew up in Muscatine, learning my values the Iowa way. I learned to work hard from great teachers like my mom. Any teachers here today? Give yourselves a round of applause. Learned to listen to folks from all walks of life as a Highview checkout boy. And I learned to work hard from those folks that led me on, and I also learned to do things the right way, especially when it's hard, from my faith and as an Eagle Scout. And my parents taught me that I had no more important responsibility than looking out for my neighbors. I saw that commitment in my grandpa's work to support his rural community while maintaining my family's century farm. And I also heard that commitment in stories of my great-grandpa Pete Wettach and his work to keep farm families afloat during the Great Depression as a Farm Security Administration supervisor. It was that Iowa upbringing and those values that inspired me to pursue a career as an attorney, hoping to serve my country and support my community. And so as attorney, I built a track record of negotiating multi-billion-dollar complex financial matters and standing up against folks in power who are trying to rig the system, trying to corrupt the system. Unfortunately, my former firm, after it was threatened by the Trump administration, ended up getting pressured to cut a deal to do $125 million worth of free work in support of their priorities. But I didn't cut that deal. I resigned in protest. Thank you. Folks, corruption is corruption. I don't care which party you belong to, Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Corruption is corruption, and corruption is always wrong. Now, the way that I was raised, when you see something wrong, you don't close your eyes, you don't look away, you stand up, you step up, and you do something about it. Am I right? That's how we do things as Iowans. And unfortunately, there's a lot going wrong in our state now, isn't there? Folks are paying more and more for everything. They're working harder than ever before, and they're still falling further and further behind. And we got a lot of politicians who are taking a taxpayer-funded paycheck and not delivering for us. It seems to me at a time like this, when folks are really struggling, the last thing they should have to worry about is their hard-earned tax dollars being wasted, misspent, or stolen by corrupt politicians. And folks, that is why the office of the state auditor exists. It's supposed to be an independent watchdog for all Iowans to save your tax dollars. And under Rob Sand, this office has done things the right way. Under Rob Sand, this office has asked the tough questions. He's asked them of Republicans and Democrats alike. He has found a record amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in our state, and he saved Iowa taxpayers, again, regardless of party, millions of dollars. Now, the problem is we got some out-of-touch politicians like our Governor Kim Reynolds and our Lieutenant Governor Chris Knoyer, who have tried to do everything that they can to limit the powers of the auditor just to do its job, just to go after the fraud, just to go after the corruption, to save your tax dollars. But they're not done there, folks. And what I'm about to tell you is why I want you all to pay attention to a state auditor race this fall when I know you got a lot of other important things going on. Go Hawks. Sorry, had to say it. They're trying to install Chris Knoyer in there, and if they get her in there, we won't have an independent watchdog anymore, folks. We will have a fox guarding the henhouse. Folks, Chris Knoyer, as the state senator, was one of the folks that voted to gut the powers of the state auditor. Let me say this again. Chris Knoyer tried to stop the auditor from being able to find stolen tax dollars. Why would we elect somebody to be state auditor who's tried to stop the state auditor's office from being able to do its job to audit, to protect your tax dollars? Seems a little crazy to me. As the kids would say, folks, the math ain't mathing. So that's why when folks that I respect in our state, across the political spectrum, encouraged me to run for state auditor, I stepped up to the plate. I'm excited to take my background dealing with complex financials and legal issues, but most of all, standing up against corruption to make sure that you all have a state auditor that will do things the right way. I don't care what party bosses think. I'm not a career politician, and I don't take a dime of corporate PAC money because I'm not going to work for insiders. I'm going to work for Iowans. And so as your state auditor, I pledge that I will go after waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption wherever it is in our state, regardless of party. Thank you. As your state auditor, I pledge that I will work to make sure that the state auditor's office keeps its powers, that we don't let corrupt politicians take away the ability of this office to do things the right way. As your state auditor, I'll work to expand transparency so folks can understand in this critical moment where their hard-earned taxpayer dollars are going. A novel idea, I know. And as your state auditor, I'll work with anyone, Democrat, Independent, or Republican, who believes that accountability and doing things the right way, the Iowa way, matters. Now, when I was growing up, I was raised to understand that Iowa was built on a simple promise. If you work hard, if you follow the rules, and if you treat your neighbors with respect, you deserve to have a good life and to leave things a little better for your kids. Folks, this race is not about left versus right. It is about right versus wrong. It's about pushing back against efforts by corrupt politicians and their mega donors to control the trajectory of the state and to take your money and to stand with the folks in this state who put in the work for this state. To stand with our families, our veterans, our seniors, our workers, our farmers, the folks that work for Iowa. Folks, we literally cannot afford to elect an out-of-touch politician who has tried to stop the auditor's office from taking your hard-earned tax dollars and expanding corruption. Folks, we need to make sure we have an independent watchdog. An independent watchdog who knows who they work for. An independent watchdog who will ask the hard questions of everyone. And an independent watchdog who, when they see corruption, will not blink. That's the job of state auditor. That's the commitment of public service. And that is my promise to each and every one of you. Thank you all so much. My name is Taylor Wettach. I'm running for state auditor. I'd be grateful for your vote November 3rd. And together we can keep an independent watchdog in the office of state auditor. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thank you. And with that, I'll take a couple questions. I'm a lawyer who fired myself on principle, so I love hard-hitting questions. Gary, you got a question?
What's the first thing you would do when you're elected office?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do as state auditor, I mean, there's a lot of work to do. People have been telling me that when we get in there, we're going to be very, very busy, folks. But I think one thing that keeps coming up when we're talking with folks, when we're talking with Democrats, Independents, Republicans, we're talking with folks in our urban areas like Polk County and all across the state, because we're traveling all across the state, is folks concerned about what's going on with the school voucher program. A lot of folks are really concerned about that. And we're not saying that folks can't go to private schools, but we are saying that if you're taking taxpayer money, people should be able to know where that money's going. Right now, folks are not being held to the same standards of our public schools. Folks have not had the sort of accountability and understanding of where that money's going that they deserve. And, you know, when Rob Sand tried to look at it, they said, well, nothing to see here, folks. Well, you know, if there's nothing to see here, let the state auditor do its job. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, folks. They're telling you, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Well, if they're telling you pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, you should probably look behind the curtain, and that's what we're looking forward to doing when we get in there. Thank you. Yeah, Bobby.
What can we do to help you?
Well, I appreciate that. You know, we're running a real grassroots campaign, folks. We're working really hard to get out there. You know, we just got in this race about seven months ago to this point, which is why some of you might be seeing me for the first time. But trust me, you will see me again because we're working really hard. You know, if you can spread the news, that goes a long way for us. Just spreading the news. Just telling your neighbors. Taking a palm card. I think my campaign manager has some palm cards here. If you take a few home with yourselves, give them out to folks you know. That goes a long way. Follow us online at social media. We're on all social media at Wettach for Iowa. You can follow us there, sharing, liking, that sort of thing. Goes a long way. Chipping in if you can. We're a grassroots campaign, as I said. We really depend upon people just giving what they can. But most of all, just telling your folks. There's nothing like hearing from your family, right, who they should vote for. That goes such a long way in terms of getting folks on board, understanding our mission, and all of that. So I'd be grateful for any folks here, if you believe in what we're doing, if you believe in making sure that we're standing up against corruption in our state, regardless of party, to go home, tell your folks, tell your friends, and join us in our fight to make sure we keep an independent watchdog in this office. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sir.
Let me ask you this: with those powers that were taken away, will you seek to make sure those powers are restored when you are in office?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The question was, with the powers of the state auditor that were taken away in 2023, will we work to restore those powers? So to give you guys a little more detail, right, in 2023, a law was passed to make it more difficult for the state auditor, and we're talking about Rob, but we're really talking about the nonpartisan public servants that work in that office to get the information that they need to complete their audits, right? I mean, again, this is why I say this is not a partisan matter. We're talking about powers that the state auditor, that the office has had under Democrats and under Republicans. These are just the powers of the office. And they didn't like the fact that the office was looking into a lot of the issues that were going on, and they decided to take away some of the ability of the office to get the information necessary to complete its audits. You know, my view is, and if you talk to folks that work in that office, they'll tell you this is true, the greatest threat to that office in 40 years has been the effort to take away these powers. And I've talked to Democrats in that office, I've talked to independents in that office, I've talked to Republicans in that office, to the non-partisan public servants working in the office. The greatest threat to the ability to do their job and actually look out for the taxpayer to save you money has been the law passed in 2023. So you better believe that we're going to work to make sure we undo that law. But the thing I want to emphasize, folks, is it shouldn't matter if the governor is a Democrat or if the governor is a Republican. If I'm elected, I'm going to work to undo that law because that's how it's supposed to be done. Because the folks in that office deserve to be able to get the information they need to fight for the taxpayer, and that doesn't matter who's in charge. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, really, really grateful to have you all with us today. We got a lot of work ahead of us over the next 10 weeks, but we know if we keep on putting in the fight, keeping on getting the word out there, we'll be able to keep an independent watchdog in this office. Thank you so much. Please vote for us on November 3rd. Taylor Wettach. Hope you guys have a great time in the fair and go buy something on a stick. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you guys. Check one, check two, check, check, check. Check one, check two, check, check, check. Mic check one, mic check two. Tss, 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 tss. Check one, check two, check, check, check. Check one, check two, check, check, check. Mic check one, mic check two, check, check, check. You good? Okay.
Hello. Welcome to the penultimate 2026 Des Moines Register Soapbox. I'm Rachel Stassenberger, and I have the honor to say I'm the executive editor of the Des Moines Register. Few ground rules we want to go over. First, we believe in civic discourse, and we believe in Iowa nice. So that means you are more than welcome to cheer, but please don't jeer, because that's not very Iowa nice. I don't see very many signs in this crowd, but our rules on signs are you got to keep them lowered, because it's not very Iowa nice to block the people behind you. And now let's welcome up Jake Hurd, who hopes to be a candidate for Congress, a Libertarian. Let's come on up, Jake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All right. As you heard, I am Jake Hurd. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Urbandale, Iowa. Pretty much lived there my whole life, other than when I was getting my education at University of Iowa and Drake. Let's see, I've got two brothers. One of them's here with me today. That fine-looking man over there. By trade, I am a criminal defense attorney. Thank you. Woo! Prior to being a criminal defense attorney, I worked as a legislative analyst for the Iowa Senate Republicans for 4 years, and then also chief of staff to the Iowa Senate President, Jake Chapman, for 2 years during the 2021 and 2022 session. Let's see. There are two reasons why I really shouldn't be on this stage. One is Marco Battaglia was the original nominee that was supposed to be the candidate for the Libertarian Party to run for the 3rd Congressional District. He was removed from the ballot because he wanted to run under the name that everyone knows him by and the name that he goes by. His real name is Mark Anderson, but because he wanted to appear on the ballot as Marco Battaglia, he got removed from the ballot by Republicans, by Secretary Paul Pate and Attorney General Brenna Byrd. Marco also ran for this same seat in 2024, but was also removed from the ballot. And that time it was a technicality for the Libertarian caucus and county conventions being held the same night, instead of there being a day separation. I ended up arguing that case in front of the Iowa Supreme Court to try to keep Marco as well as the other congressional candidates on the ballot, but was unsuccessful. And this cycle, same thing happened again. Republicans found a technicality to remove Marco from the ballot. And the second reason why I shouldn't be on this stage is right now, I'm not officially a candidate on the ballot for the November general election. The Libertarian State Committee voted about 2 weeks ago to replace Marco, as well as Nick Gluba and Jules Cutler for the governor and lieutenant governor seats. When we turned in our nomination papers this last Monday, 2 days later, the Secretary of State's office said that the proper procedure wasn't filed with their office in time, and therefore he's not accepting my candidacy, as well as the governor and lieutenant governor's candidacy to appear on the November 3rd general election ballot. So there is a petition filed in the Polk County District Court right now. We'll get a ruling Thursday on whether or not we can force the Secretary of State to approve of our nominations and put us on the ballot. But I want to spend my time up here not talking about my platform, my policy issues. I want to talk about the problems and risks our current political system, dominated by the two political parties, has to our liberty, our freedom, and ultimately our democratic republic. The two political parties agree on one thing, and that's guaranteed, and it's that they're going to remain the two parties as far as they can help it. As I said earlier, I was a legislative analyst and chief of staff for the Senate Republicans. I've been in those meetings behind closed doors, and I've heard the conversations when Democrats and Republicans are negotiating election bills. They make sure that their interests, no matter what, are taken care of. And they both agree that there shouldn't be a third party in the running. One of the biggest risks and problems that are posed by only a two-party system is that nothing gets done when there's a policy issue that has to be decided when there's split control. And when when one party does control, you get their policy preference, and then when, as nature happens, the parties shift, and you get a huge policy pendulum, a big rubber band effect, so to speak. One other danger and risk that a two-party system poses is that when one party controls both legislative and executive branch, like has been in Iowa for over a decade now, I believe, there's no checks and balances anymore. Our whole system of government was built on checks and balances. But when you have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, that check goes away, because that party isn't going to want to embarrass or reduce the power of their governor, so to speak. This can be best exemplified by what happened in Iowa during COVID-19. Our governor passed executive orders with a swipe of a pen that precluded families from gathering for holidays, that precluded people from gathering for religious services and religious worship. And our legislature, allegedly Republicans that believe in freedom, did nothing to check that power. To this day, they have done nothing to check that power. No governor should have the ability to decide which industries are essential, what job is essential, but yet our governor did that, and our legislature has done nothing to stop it or prevent it in the future. When we go to the ballot box, all Iowans are given a false choice right now. It's either Democrat or Republican. If you vote for a Libertarian, you're wasting a vote. If you vote for an independent, you're wasting a vote. That is a false choice. There are other options out there. The Libertarian Party is one of them, but that's not the only one. Every Iowan can have a good idea, have a good policy solution. But when you're limited to just Democrats and Republicans, it gives you a false choice and a false idea or premise that there's only two solutions. And also, when you have two-party control, when you go to the ballot box, when you vote for the person that has a D or an R next to their name, you're voting for the D or R. You're not voting for that candidate. The candidate is merely the vessel by which the Democrat or Republican Party gets in control. During my time in the Senate, it became very obvious to me that power has become centralized in the majority leaders of the respective houses. The majority leader in the Senate, for example, gets to decide which bills come to the floor for a debate. They get to decide which of their members are on which committees, who's the chair and who's the vice chair and ranking member, or not the ranking member, but the vice chair and chair. The members of the Senate are beholden to the majority leader for their power in the legislature and also for their campaign financing. Because as the majority leader has the ability to call bills to the floor, that person logically gets the most support or donations from lobbyists trying to get their bill past the chambers. And when a member doesn't do what the majority leader wants, guess what? They get removed from that committee. And guess what? They don't get as much from the majority fund as they should. And I mainly want to use this platform to let you all Iowans know that Republicans, and it's only because Republicans are in power right now, but Republicans are systematically and intentionally removing libertarians in particular from the ballot. Republicans believe that libertarians take votes away from them, so they don't want us on the ballot. And that's what happened in 2024 when all three Libertarian congressional candidates were removed from the ballot. And it's happening again in 2024. The Libertarian candidate for governor, for example, got over 8,000 petition signatures. 8,000. But because of a Secretary of State election worker telling the lieutenant governor candidate her affidavit of candidacy wasn't needed, they were removed from the ballot. And then for their replacement, Nick Gluba for governor was replaced by himself, and then Charles Aldrich, or Chuck Aldrich, was voted on to replace Jules Cutler for lieutenant governor. They're in the same situation I am. Secretary of State's office is refusing to accept their nomination and to put them on the ballot, as well as me on the ballot. And like I said, we do have a court case going to force the Secretary of State to do that, but it's unclear at this point. Our founding fathers were exceptionally wise. If you have read the Federalist Papers, or if you haven't read the Federalist Papers, I strongly recommend you do. James Madison wrote in Federalist number 10 that factions or political parties pose a risk to our democratic republic. They will ultimately lead to a tyranny of the majority, which it seems like we're getting close to here in Iowa, where Republicans don't even want to let the voters of Iowa have another option besides them in the Democrat Party. This is now the second cycle in a row that the governor candidate and congressional candidates for Libertarian parties have been removed from the ballot based on technicalities. And if this continues, I fear for our democratic republic and for our freedom here in Iowa. It shouldn't be that tough to let the people of Iowa choose. If Republicans believe their policy ideas win the day, then they should be able to face any challenger on the ballot. But yet there's this myth that libertarians steal from Republicans, and there's a lot of close races, allegedly, this year, and Republicans don't want Iowans to have any other option to solidify or to continue their power. And again, I'm Jake Hurd. I hope to be on the ballot for the congressional U.S. Representative for the 3rd Congressional District. But as of right now, I am not officially a candidate, and we will find out on Thursday. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to the Des Moines Register Political Soapbox. I'm Rachel Stassenberger, the executive editor of the Register, and all fair long, we have been inviting candidates up to speak directly to the people. Our next candidate is our last candidate. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank those people online who have been watching this vociferously. And now a little bit more. First of all, we believe in civic discourse, which is why we put this on, and we believe in Iowa Nice. In this context, Iowa Nice means you are more than welcome to cheer, but please don't jeer, because that's not very Iowa Nice. And I see some great signs here. Hold them up, shake them around, and now lower them, lower them, lower them, because I don't know about you. Lower them, please. Good job. Because I don't know about you, but these Iowa eyes can't see through a sign, and so it's not very Iowa Nice to block people from being able to see the candidate. And our candidate right now is Chris Jones, a Democrat running for Secretary of Agriculture. Chris, come on up. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, folks, for coming. A little bit about me. I live in Iowa City. My folks are both from Knoxville, Iowa, southeast of here. When they married, they moved to Monmouth, Illinois, which is where I was born. They moved back in 1967 to Ankeny, and my mom still lives there. She's here today. And so I'm happy to have her be able to come to one of my events here. And I remember as a kid, my grandparents had an Airstream trailer, and they would worked at the state fair, and I'd come down here and stay in that Airstream trailer during the fair. And so those were the days, right, when the fair was still just as popular as it is now. Yes, I'm the candidate for Secretary of Agriculture. My campaign is focused on clean water, okay? And I tell people they should view the campaign as a referendum on the condition of Iowa's water. And so if you think the condition of our water is adequate, if you think progress towards cleaning it up is adequate, then I'm probably not your person, right, that you want to consider voting for. If you think those things are not adequate, then, you know, I would urge you to consider my campaign. We need a change here in Iowa. We see that people are upset and they're outraged about the condition of the water. I worked here in Des Moines for many years. I worked at the Des Moines Water Works. I managed the laboratory. In the morning, I would go from the laboratory over to the pumping station to talk to my boss. If the Raccoon River was muddy and foamy and smelly and full of nitrate, I'd get over there and he'd say, "Where's the outrage that this is the water that we have to treat for 500,000 people?" And I'd say, "Yeah, where's the outrage?" And so I think in the last year or two, the outrage has arrived, right? We're finally fed up. We need to demand better. If we cannot expect our government to deliver clean water to our tap, right, what can we expect our government to do effectively? It's just one of these basic quality of life issues. It should be an expectation that every time we draw a glass of water from our tap, that we will have confidence that it's safe. And so that's where we're at. I think that's where the population is now. They don't have that expectation anymore, and they want change, right? Everywhere we go, we just see that people want change. The state's approach to the water quality problem has been incremental. For a long time now, the better part of a half a century. We've tried to inspire farmers to adopt conservation voluntarily. We've tried to nibble at the edges of the corn-soy system and the CAFO system to try to make water quality better by just spending $1 million here and $1 million there and $1 million over yonder on this Band-Aid conservation, and it has not worked. Right? We know it has not worked. The proof is in the pudding. The water is just as bad as it's ever been. Let's do something different. We can't continue this incremental approach. We need systematic change, right? We need systematic change in this farming system if we're going to get the environmental outcomes that we want. At the same time, we need to do that in a way that preserves farmer incomes, preserves their livelihoods, preserves their way of life, but also help us, let's devise an agricultural system that's going to help us restore economic vitality to our rural areas. And so, as I said, my folks are from Knoxville. I can remember driving around these small towns in southern Iowa when I was a kid, and these were nice places, right? These were places where you would want to live. They were prosperous. Anyone would want to live there, and we see so many of our small towns now are just shells of their former self. And we see this happen over and over and over again with the town. You lose your physician, you lose your attorney, you lose your grocery store, you lose your school, you lose your post office, and all that's left is a tavern, right? And so this is not what I want for small town Iowa. Nobody I know wants that. We need to restore some diversity in agriculture. All this consolidation in our agricultural system where we focus on just 2 crops. We only have a small set of farmers raising livestock. 70% of our corn goes to ethanol. This has not brought prosperity to rural Iowa. In fact, I would suggest it's almost destroyed rural Iowa. So how do we change this? We need a diversity of crops. We need things other than corn and soy. We know we cannot get the water quality that we want when we only have 2 species of plants on the landscape, right? We need a diversity of crops. We need farmers growing crops like oats. We need fruits and vegetable crops. We need pastured cattle again. We need to rebuild, build out our cattle industry here, our beef cattle industry. We saw yesterday Trump is going to bring in 660 million pounds of ground beef into the country over the next 90 days. You know, why, again, another Band-Aid approach here? Why are we so reliant on these Band-Aid approaches? Let's build out our cattle industry. Let's raise cattle sustainably, in a resilient way, and let's raise them humanely, and let's build out our beef industry such that we get better water quality and we're not having these harebrained ideas about bringing beef in from other countries. We see this in other policies here that, like the tariffs on soybeans, for example, the ACA increase insurance rates that farmers have to pay. We see these harebrained schemes from the Trump administration, and we see the incumbent Secretary of Agriculture here, Mike Naig, stand up to Trump. Not at all, right? Not at all. And the rest of the Republican delegation here in Iowa just goes along with this stuff from the Trump administration that's just destructive for Iowa and destructive for rural Iowa especially. So let's take a different approach here. Let's try to diversify our farms. Again, that's the most important thing I can tell you, is that's what we need. We need a diversity of crops. We need a diversity of economy, and we need a diversity of people in rural Iowa working on agriculture. This is how we'll get, this is how you get better water. This is how you get better water. Just going forward with corn and soy and CAFOs and ethanol, that's not how you get better water. And people oftentimes say to me, well, what you're describing is going backwards, right? And agriculture doesn't like to go backwards. Society doesn't like to go backwards. We need to look for a technological fix for this pollution. And I reject that. A lot of these things like growing oats and raising cattle on pasture and growing fruits and vegetable crops, we know how to do it so much better now. Okay, we know how to do it so much better than we did 50 years ago that I reject the idea that it's going backwards. But for the sake of argument, let's say it is. Let's say it is going backwards. What does going forward from this look like, right? Because it looks pretty bad to me. And I'll tell you what it looks like to me. It looks to me like somebody sitting at a laptop in Mumbai, India, farming 50,000 acres of flat Iowa farmland that's owned by a hedge fund, or a billionaire or, you know, an NFL quarterback. Is that what we want for rural Iowa? No. And so we need a restoration of these diverse farming systems that are going to bring back rural Iowa to what it was before. One of the most important things we need here is small-scale livestock production. And so we see only a few thousand farmers out of 85,000 have livestock now. If you want to raise livestock at the small scale, say 50 head of cattle and 100 head of hogs, you can't even do it, right? You can't even do it because the big packers are all controlled by the four big meat companies. They don't want livestock from small scale livestock producers. They won't even take those animals. They're just, the small guy is an annoyance to them. And so we need a restoration of a small scale of meat processing here so farmers can get back to producing cattle and hogs at the small scale and make money doing it. And I think we can do that. A key also I want to emphasize is returning cattle to pasture. Now, naturally, there's going to be some farmers that don't want to transition to these more sustainable systems, these off-ramps, as I say, and I think it's correct for the taxpayer to participate in these off-ramps. Some farmers aren't going to want to go that direction. They're going to want to stick with corn and soy and CAFOs. I think that system needs some regulation, right? That's the fast lane. We need a speed limit on the fast lane. I think it's crazy to think that we can restrict use of the natural resource downstream, which is here in Des Moines and other cities, and then give the industry license to do whatever they want upstream. That's perverse policy. And so we need some common sense regulations. There's things we can do that we know would not affect crop yields and would not affect farmer income, that are just practices that we allow just because they're convenient, right? And so, you know, I'm a human being too. I like what's convenient, but I don't like trading the quality of my water for someone else's convenience. So let's get these off-ramps. Let's the taxpayer help farmers transition to more sustainable systems, and let's get some regulation on the other side. The last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll take some questions, is local foods. There is a desperate desire for local fruits and vegetables in our cities in Iowa. We import 97% of our food in Iowa. And we hear the industry now, we hear a Farm Bureau over here say, well, we feed the world. Well, we don't even feed Polk County, right? And so if we're going to feed the world, we have to feed Iowa first. So let's produce some food here for our systems. We spend $13 billion on groceries every year. All that goes out of the state. It leaves Iowa. Let's keep that money here. Let's recruit farmers to grow fruits and vegetables, to raise livestock sustainably here, and let's supply food to our cities. Let's supply food to our schools, right? And so I have a plan. I have a plan to do that. We want to commit $10 million a year to that. That might sound big, but think about this. We're spending $330 million a year on vouchers, right? $330 million a year on vouchers. We have given gas stations in Iowa $70 million to put in gas pumps just for E15 and E10. So we ought to be able to get some local foods for $10 million. We ought to be able to have our school children eating healthy food. I think you've all heard about the high cancer rate. We have the second highest cancer rate. We have, we're one of only 3 states where the cancer rate is increasing. Well, one of the main things we talk about in avoiding cancer is eating a healthy diet, eating foods that are not awash in chemicals and pesticides and preservatives, so they can get here from California and Arizona and Texas and Chile and Florida. And so if we want to reduce the cancer rate, let's produce some fresh, healthy foods here in Iowa so people can eat food that has been produced by Iowa farmers. Again, we need to look at this as a water quality project too. We know corn and soy are our two most polluting crops. Let's get some of these acres in something else, okay? And so let's spend a couple minutes here taking questions. Everywhere I go, people just want to talk to me and they just want to ask me questions. So let's do that. Yes, sir.
What can I do to help you get elected?
So ChrisJonesForIowa.com is a website. You can donate there. You can also volunteer there. We already have over 450 volunteers statewide. A fun thing that for volunteers to do is to work a table at a farmer's market. And so that's a great thing. It's a lot of volunteers are doing that. And so we have other things we can do. We're going to be doing canvassing and other things. And so that's what I would suggest. Go to ChrisJonesForIowa.com. Again, volunteer there, donate there. And let's talk about donations a little bit here. I really detest asking people for money. And I don't do that at my events. Typically, I want to inspire you, right? I want to inspire you to figure out how you can donate. We are raising money. I've checked today, we have about 4,000 individual donors already, right? My opponent has about 400, right? But those 400 are loaded. Right? And there are a lot of these corporate agribusinesses that I talk about so often that just kind of own Iowa. They've taken control of our agriculture. So this has got to be grassroots. It's got to be a grassroots effort to do this, a grassroots effort to get me elected and to improve our water. Yes. So one of the reasons why we have the system we do is because it's not regulated, right? And so we have CAFOs for a reason. It's because policy has made it easy for CAFOs to exist and do business. And so we need policy that's going to enhance the likelihood of other production systems. And so we need pasture. We need to return some ground to pasture. And so that connects with the renewable fuel standard. And in 2005, with the renewable fuel standard, we saw a lot of our acres go out of pasture and into corn. Farmers just decided it was easier to grow corn than it was to graze cattle. We need policy that's going to reverse that, right? And so when we do that, we address both the CAFO thing and the ethanol thing. And so I should have repeated the question there. How do I get people away from CAFOs and ethanol, which are the two religions here? We need to have a strategic discussion about ethanol, right? We know the demand for liquid fuels is going to decline. You've heard of these Chinese electric cars. If they ever get into this country, people are going to want these things. We know that young people drive less these days. In 1980, 80% of 18-year-olds had a driver's license. Now it's down to 60%. We see all these devices that people use for transportation. And so we know the demand for liquid fuels is going to decline. With that, there's going to be a decline for ethanol. We need to discuss now what we're going to do with all these acres where we're growing corn for ethanol. Yes. So the question is, what's my position on taking land out of production for data centers? To me, the scary thing about data centers is how they've gotten control of our local governments. And so these data centers, nobody even hears about them until like 3 months before they're going to start pouring concrete, and it's already a done deal, right? And so we've had these non-disclosure agreements and these secret deals with local political officials. That's the scariest thing to me about data centers. And so I think that's reason enough to call a timeout here, right? We need to call a timeout. Let's let society and our politics react to what's happening with the data centers. And so if you want to call that a moratorium, go ahead. But I think we need a year or two here to kind of get our wits back on these data centers and figure out what the role here is for them in Iowa. I think in Iowa, our land should be used for its highest use, right? the highest use for our land, that we have the best land, we have the best weather. The highest use is to grow food, right? To grow food that we can put into our mouths. That's the highest use. I think restoring small livestock production in our rural areas, small-scale meat processing is a much better way to create jobs in rural Iowa than building a data center where 6 people are going to work in it, you know, for decades after it's built. And so agriculture should be the driver here for restoration of rural Iowa. It should not be data centers, right? So, yes. All right. So we know, we've known for 26 years at least that drinking water with elevated nitrate is a risk for cancer. One of the first studies was the Iowa Women's Health Study. It was conducted at the University of Iowa. They published their paper in 2000. It showed that women, postmenopausal women that have consumed drinking water with nitrate above 5 parts per million had an increased risk of bladder cancer. That was one of the first studies. Since that time, we've seen other studies in Europe and North America showing drinking water above 3 parts per million nitrate increases your risk for thyroid cancer, colorectal cancer, prostate cancer is another big one connected to nitrate. And so we've known this for a long time, right? We've known this for a quarter century of these risks, and politicians have not reacted, right? They've not reacted. Well, 3 parts per million is the threshold now that we know is associated with cancer. We have 1 million people in Iowa drinking water above 3 parts per million nitrate. The water here coming out of the tap in the drinking fountain in this building, it's above, okay. Time's up. Thanks for coming today. ChrisJonesForIowa.com.
That's all right. She held it up, but you were.